Washington's offense should be top 5 in the Big Ten.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Rome Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's the site editor with Athlon Sports. It's Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today and stay energized. Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers today. We're going to be talking some pro dogs a little bit later on. We're going to be drafting some of the guys we think could just take a big leap forward in 2025. Could be some rookies, could be some second-year guys, rookies, Carson Bruner, Kaleki Latu, anybody like that. We'll have some fun with that, get to that a little bit later on. We're talking some 2026 linebacker recruiting targets, because there are two guys that we certainly need to bring up that we weren't able to talk about last time, but we'll get there as well, because Lars, with Demond Williams at the helm, Jonah Coleman, Adam Mohammad in the backfield, Denzel Boston back in the fold, and improved offensive line, there's no reason this shouldn't be a top 5 offense in the Big Ten this season.
No, and on today, as we're recording this on March 20th, Demond Williams Jr.'s birthday. So the key reason for all this and being a top 5 offense is everything starts and ends with Demond, but more importantly, you have to have the essential pieces around him, where as long as Carver Willis is able to take that left tackle spot, or whether he's right, shore up a tackle spot. Let's just say left tackle for now, Drew Hardy is able to either, make it right and kind of take that next step at right tackle, or somebody else, whoever the case may be. But everybody else along the offensive line, because Landon is now squatting 585, 565, whatever that was that he posted.
Something like that, yeah.
And look at me and doing it. One of those where it's like, okay, like this ain't no joke here. So you're talking about an improved all-around offensive line, guys that even did play last year, like Landon, taking that next step. So as long as the offensive line is there, no doubt you have the stable of running backs. No doubt you have the quarterback, and no doubt you have the receivers and tight ends. So for me, it's just about, can you put it all together? Because all the pieces are there. You don't have to wonder, I wonder should they have got on another receiver. It's like, no, whatever receivers end up emerging, whether it's Omari Evans or Sheed, Audric, whoever, so be it. Because you got Denzel. That's all well and good. Everything is there. It's just a matter of, can the offensive line do just enough, which I think it can. But that's also requiring some young guys to really take a step up, which we fully haven't seen yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you put it like that, because that is the biggest thing, right? It is the offensive line. We don't need to talk about Carver Willis or Landon Hatchett or even Maxis McCree, who I think could end up being a really solid piece this fall. We saw that last year before he got hurt. It's on the Zach Hennings of the world, the Pocky Finaus of the world, to step up and secure a starting spot for Gearin Hatchett, who looks like he could be a steady veteran piece, which would be really nice. And, no matter what it ends up looking like, it's not last year, where the depth is so much better. It's young, it's inexperienced. So, we're going to have this conversation several times over the course of the spring, the summer, even into the fall, where it's, hey, watch out for this team. But there's a lot of inexperience on that. But this is one of the things that is really interesting about Jedd Fisch, about his offensive staff, is not just the continuity, not just all that, with the recruiting, with all the young guys that they're bringing in. They have a lot of confidence in themselves to make sure that it's right. And in what's going to be year 2, you really do have the pieces that you didn't last year, where, hey, yeah, a lot of these names were underclassmen on the roster last year, sure, whether it is Demond or it is Pocky, Rasheed Williams, but they didn't play a lot, and you didn't really have that, just that confidence to say, all right, we think that this guy is really going to be able to step up, where even Denzel didn't have that proven experience where, you and I were going to be able to talk about him because we saw him at practice for 2 years. We already knew what that was going to look like, but for, just the greater good people around the Big Ten, you weren't able to see that, and bringing in, a piece like Jonah Coleman, who I think is, I don't think he's the biggest piece. That's obviously Demond Williams, but I think he is right there with Demond as one of the most important pieces of this offense. We saw him showing off his new physique on Twitter, losing 15 pounds, 2% of body fat, and just looking like a very different running back. Combining that guy with Adam Mohammad, with Jordan Washington, it gives you a really fun rushing attack that you also just didn't have last season, because the offensive line wasn't there to really clear the way. And we saw what it looked like early on. And then, as Jonah was dealing with the knee in the middle of the year and the offensive line started facing bigger, more physical, college football playoff contending teams, we saw that take a step back. So I think this season, with a little bit more under everybody's belt, especially on the offensive line, we won't see some of those issues as the season wears on.
Yeah, in a way, it's almost like you're looking at Jonah and thinking, okay, this is you're going from being a really good college running back to truly preparing for the NFL. It's why I know people were like, oh, is Jonah going to go? Is Jonah going to go? I was always of the opinion it would be really surprising, especially when you have the Aston Gentis in the world. In a way, like I'm not saying he could have that type of go in the early top 10, top 15 picks next year. But Jonah's absolutely a guy where he's going from a really good running back in college already in his first couple of seasons to now put it all together next season. Show why you should be a day one, early day two pick, depending on how he ends up performing. For that exact reason, take care of the physique. Go from not just being a big guy that can handle the bumps and bruises to maybe put some more strength on, get a little bit leaner, and in a way actually be able to take those hits. Because we saw, especially in pass blocking, those hits start to mount up, and that's no shot at Jonah. It's just see if you can get your body in even better physical shape. Yeah. That's kind of what we're saying. Where it's like everything was good last season. Like you had a really good running back. It's why you wanted Jonah to come back. And in that same light, you have Adam Mohammad, who can now, similar to Damon, take that next step. Now that you've played all 12 games or 13 games as a freshman, put it all together, take that next step in the running back offset. Jonah. That's like that can't go unnoticed because if you just have one running back, that's one thing. Jonah in of himself is good, but also having Adam and Jordan Washington really expanding those guys' role as well, I think is going to play a significant role because you look at it and think you have the receivers, but you can't put it all on Jonah. He has the ability to, but you really shouldn't put it all on Jonah. I don't think you are, that's why we can't forget about Adam Mohammad and Jordan Washington in that same light as well.
And it's also just I don't think it's the most important piece of this either, but you also can't forget about Damon Williams in that light, where he had the second most rushing attempts on the team, even if you take out the sacks that he took, where that is such a big part of this, where, you and I talked about it the last time we discussed what Jonah's role might be this season, where you want to, take some of that wear and tear off of him, where he is such an efficient running back. Where it's so impressive. You go look at his career yards per carry. I'm pretty sure it's 5.6, 5.7. I was writing that out earlier. I don't have the number off the top of my head right now, but I know it's 5.46 last year. And that was down from his career average. So that's a really big part of this, where he is such an efficient guy that if you're able to decrease his workload and increase not just Damon's, but Adams and Jordan Washington's, it's a rushing attack that really does work for the Big Ten, where I'm not by any means comparing it to what Ohio State was last year, because that's just different, where both those guys, and it certainly could be the case if you look back on it 2, 3, 4 years from now, but with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, it's two high-end running backs where it's, hey, this guy's getting a little tired. Let's give him a breather. We're going to bring in this other high-end guy. And the reason I say that is because that's absolutely how the staff feels about not just having Damon back there, where he can be a really efficient guy with his legs, but it's how they feel about Adam Mohammad. And that's so clear because they played him in all 13 games, and they kept trying to find ways to work him in, even more so than Cam Davis at different points of time, because they are just that high on him. And you can hear it every time Scotty Graham talks about him. And it's something where, to just bring this back with the theme of the segment being a top 5 offense, if you're able to show what you did early on last season with a really efficient passing attack, which we've seen Damon be able to do that and complete over 80% of his passes in both of his starts, with a rushing attack that is bolstered by a really just has to be average to slightly above average offensive line, you're going to be in a really good spot. And I feel like you might be overlooked by, some national analysts in the Big Ten come this spring, come this summer, which is going to be a lot of fun to watch. But Lars, we're also really intrigued by these 2026 linebacker targets. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Nissan. We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the team, plus the gear, wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. We've also got a message from our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late, watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. With longer days, I love getting outside for a hike or a run, and Tropical Burst is my go-to for a quick boost. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery store or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. So, Lars, we had this conversation very recently. So, to all the everydayers, we're like, hey, didn't you guys just talk about this? Yes, we did. But we made a really big omission in the form of two omissions. And that's twin brothers Beau and Niko Jandreau from Chandler High School in Arizona, because they have set an official visit to come up to Washington. And Lars, I dove into the film of both of those guys, where Niko is listed as a safety, like nickel linebacker, and Beau is listed as a linebacker. And so I want to talk about both of them as linebackers, because I believe that both of them could play that, or they could play safety, or they could play nickel, it's really fun to have this conversation regarding twin brothers, because we've had this conversation before, not, since this podcast has existed, with the Parker brothers, and we haven't seen them play next to each other just yet. But I watched these two guys, and man, are they underrated. Like, I know this is something we say a lot when we talk about 3-star guys, but you go and you watch the film, and those guys just fly to the ball. They are so fast, so athletic, and Beau's a little higher rated. He's got some more offers and just bigger name schools after him, but you can't sleep on these guys.
No, they're almost two perfect summations of what Ryan Walters and in a way what Steve Belichick would have done, which is we're just trying to find the best 11 guys. Like you mentioned, Niko Jandreau, trying to figure out what position you can call him an athlete. They're both athletes at the end of the day. But Beau being I think he's slightly bigger, not a ton.
Yeah, he's listed at 215. You're right.
And so, but again, there's not like one's not like 165 and then one's 215. So it's not a massive gap like that. But there's enough of a size of whatever. They might not play linebacker, but to your point, let's run with the fact that they could be. I think it almost perfectly fits Ryan Walters' scheme, where one's a true linebacker, Beau more so, and you have Niko kind of roaming and doing whatever. But I feel like they could, in a way, be interchangeable depending on situations, down and distance, those sorts of situations and things. But you look at it and think, why not just pitch? Like, I would have to imagine, again, I haven't spoken to him. I don't know if you have either, but I would imagine I wonder, it's like, how tight is the bond? Because if you can play together, Ryan Walters' scheme almost seems to be the perfect pitch to do that, where it's, hey, we can find you guys a way to get on the field at both times where you don't have to be one or the other, because Niko, you might end up, being a little bit more like a safety linebacker sort of thing, and Beau, you could be the true defensive play caller like Carson was, or Alfonso was, and just make it work like that. But to me, anytime you can go in the state of Arizona, where Jed has done very well for himself, not just coaching at Arizona, but in terms of high school recruiting, and then bring those guys up to Washington, you don't really have to leave the West Coast, and I'm going to throw Arizona in the coast here, to find your linebackers. And I think that you're not taking probably 2-3 maybe, like you're not looking at that number thinking you got a huge amount of reload. That's why I think Niko, if you could kind of count him in that defense.
No, I like this.
And throw a Beau. It's like, hey, look, we really need one linebacker, but we could use another one at defensive back because we're looking for 5, and Niko would solve another problem there as well.
So that's where it gets interesting with these guys, where, when you talk about Beau, I watch his film and I say, this dude could play safety just full time if he wanted to, because he is so good in coverage. Like, I love the way he reads eyes. He comes downhill and he'll play like quarterback spy. He does a whole lot of those different things on his film, where just the way he closes, dude, if you want to play safety and just walk down in the box at linebacker, like that's so I'm glad you talked about Ryan Walters' scheme being a good fit for him, because I think we'll see that this year with, whether it be McEllisteen, Alex McLaughlin, or CJ Christian, somebody is going to do that. And he just feels like that Beau feels like he fits that so well. And Niko could do the same thing, but he could play nickel, and that's a really big nickel. Like, that's a really nice big athlete for that position, where, right now we're talking about Rashawn Clark, maybe Dyson McCutcheon, or Alex McLaughlin finding a way to win that role. And that's fine because those are all really good players. Alex being, the biggest of those three. So I think he's a good, comparison to make here. And it's, I kind of think about it as to what it could have been a bunch of years ago when Kyler Gordon was in that spot and what he does now with the Chicago Bears, where he's a big, really athletic player in that role where, again, I'm not making a true player comparison, but it's just having a Swiss Army knife piece. And that's what both these guys are. And so we knew we wanted to spend a couple minutes on those guys. We talked a lot about Ramsack Fruin. We've talked a lot about Isaiah Tokyo, who's another really interesting prospect in that mold. Both those guys have set official visits. Another one who I really wanted to mention because I wrote about him the other day over on Huskies Wire. He was up here for the Junior Day weekend, and he's listed as an edge rusher right now, and I get it. And I fully expect him to be a really good edge if that's the position he wants to play in college. But I watched Shaun Scott from Modern Day, the 4-star, again, edge rusher. And I think, man, if you want to use this guy like Zedrius Rainey-Saleh, I think that would be a fantastic way to use him because I watch him play edge rusher and I say, wow, he is really, really intelligent. And he just understands moves and counter moves and how to get to the quarterback and how to just time a stunt correctly, which is a lot of fun. And you talk about a fit for Ryan Walter's scheme. And he would do that so well. Or if you want to play him inside, great. You want to walk him down and play outside in a role that, you and I talked about Exree Alexander maybe playing or that Zedrius could play. Just there are a whole bunch of options that we haven't seen yet. Still a few weeks out from spring practice, right? But I watch Shaun Scott and I say, I totally understand why you're in on the kid. He's extremely talented. But if he keeps growing and wants to play edge full time, I think he would work out really well there. But as of right now, he's listed at 6'3", 230. Why not, if you're able to get a commitment, get him back up on an official visit, earn a signature, all those sorts of things? Why not try him an inside linebacker too and see what happens? Because they're after so many big projectable bodies at the position where, I talk about him, Ramsack, and Isaiah Tokyo. They're all at least 6'3". Like these are really big dudes.
Exactly. Well, and I think more to the point, it's kind of building off of the theme of this segment, which is linebacker targets. When Steve Belichick came in, you kind of had to pitch the whole, hey, it's Belichick, and we'll see you wait to see what his defense looks like. With Ryan Walters, you've already seen it in college. So you don't have to tell recruits, hey, wait until September until you can see it. Just turn on the tape of what he did at Illinois, Purdue, Missouri. Now, and obviously, it won't be exactly a carbon copy because he might have a couple of tweaks here and there, which is to be expected, but it's not going to be overly different. And so you can turn on the tape and say, hey, you know what? See how he, you player X plays, Shaun, you can kind of do a hybrid of both. And the key being like you mentioned, you already have that interest there. And same thing with the other couple guys that you mentioned, where they've at least come up for a visit to Washington. They already have a general interest. Wherever they end up lining up, so be it. It's kind of like,
sure,
that's almost another pitch in the bank for Washington to say, like, Shaun Scott, you can play edge, you can play linebacker. We'll figure out which one you want to do when you get here. If you end up wanting to just stay at edge, great. And then maybe in a handful of plays, we line you up in a zero gap, or you kind of have that Deshaun Lynch mold where it's, hey, like you're not really on the edge, but you're kind of just in the middle. We're just kind of lining you up. It's about getting all best 11 players on the defense, and which again is kind of the overarching theme of the Jandreau point. It doesn't necessarily matter where you're listed and ranked. It's about where can we see you having the most impact, and that's why Ryan Walters is such an appealing defensive coordinator to come play for. It's why Jed, I think, honestly said he's the best in the country because there's so many different looks and pictures that he can show, and that's why you want to get a multitude of different types of guys. So even though, like you mentioned, 6'2", 230 as an edge, could be undersized. You might want to get a little bit bigger, or why not? Like you mentioned, slide him inside and just see what happens. And if it ends up not working out, or he ends up, it's not really, I'm not really feeling it, put him back at edge. So be it. Because again, you're going to have the Jandreaus potentially, and/or a couple of the linebackers. You don't necessarily have to force anything. It's about having all those options, and I think that's why all the names that we threw out in the segment are worth monitoring because the interest is already there. Now it's just a matter of where can you fit best, and that's what time will tell.
So I want to spend a minute here talking about everyone's favorite thing when it comes to just recruiting in general, and it's body type. Where I'm so curious about just what it's going to look like. Because again, you're right. We've seen it before from, Illinois, from Purdue, all that sort of stuff, but it's obviously going to be a little different. And from what Ryan Walters may have learned over the last couple of years, I think that has played really, really heavily into just what the linebacker just plan is on the recruiting trail, where we can go out and look at who they got in the transfer portal, right? You are not passing on Jacob Manu. He's not necessarily, he doesn't fit this mold very well where he's a true inside linebacker, but the way he comes down and hits and plays with just so much physicality is something you would just not pass on. Buda Alukta, same thing. He is so productive when he's around the ball. You know, you look at the interceptions, the forced fumbles, all that sort of stuff. He knows how to make it happen. And then with Exery, it's the big physical mold. Right? He is the best example for, you know, just the guys who have already played college football, right? Where Donovan Robinson and Zadris Rainey-Saleh and what Jonathan Epperson can be all, you know, embody this really well. But you just look at the projectability of what a lot of these guys are. They are big, they are fast, they are physical, and they're all buzzwords, right? But you know, there's a difference between somebody being big and like built already and being Ramzak Fruin and he's 6'4", 205 pounds. It's all right. There is so much projectability left. The ceiling is still so high and it doesn't feel like he's scratched the surface of reaching what he can do. And that's what I'm so curious about. You know, when I talk about body types, it's, you know, we mentioned Jonah Coleman and what that he looked like in the strength program after, you know, a couple of years and especially these last 2 months of the offseason, where imagine what you can do for some of these guys with that sort of frame with 2, 3, 4, 5 years to work with. It is so enticing. And you talk about just what the overarching goal of all of this is. It's getting more physical in the front seven in the Big Ten, which is why you lost so many games down the stretch last year. You were, I don't want to say you're overcorrecting. It's you learned from it. And now you say, hey, this is what we feel like we need. We're going to go after this. And I think that's a very interesting thing. And that doesn't just come from Jed Fish. That comes from Ryan Walters, who has spent the last 4 years now in the Big Ten saying, this is going to be really important. Let's go after that. So I think that's a lot of fun. Just something to think about. But Lars, I think Rome Odunze is going to be a Pro Bowler this next season.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown. Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
So Lars, I'm so excited about what a Rome Odunze can do this fall. I was writing some stuff over on Huskies Wire and listening to an interview he did during this Super Bowl week on Radio Row with the Pro Football Talk guys. And he starts talking about Ben Johnson. And I couldn't help but be like, man, with the moves they made along the offensive line, I'm so excited about him. Where so many people are just fantasy football brained. I'm certainly one of those people, but if you just take a step back and look at what Rome Odunze did last season, 54 catches, 735 yards, and 3 touchdowns, that's a really solid rookie year, especially when you're sitting behind 2 veteran Pro Bowl wide receivers in DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, where he was 3rd on the team in basically every single statistic outside of touchdowns where he was 4th. I look at this now and I say, Keenan Allen's out of the building. Ben Johnson's coming in. Ben Johnson produced 2,000-yard receivers last season in Detroit with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. And I say he could very easily do that again in Chicago this season, especially when I like Cole Kmet at tight end, but I look at Rome and I say, this is very clearly what Ryan Poles, their general manager, envisioned as their future. It's finding a way to get Rome Odunze more involved and pair him with Caleb Williams for the foreseeable future, where I feel like I honestly can't think the last time this happened, where you were able to pick a quarterback at number 1 overall and a wide receiver in the top 10 and say, hey, go for it. I truly don't know if that's ever happened. I have to just go back and check way too much draft stuff, which I don't have time for, to figure that out. But the more I look at it, and the more I look at what Ben Johnson's offensive scheme could be with those 2 guys plus an improved offensive line, I just say, yeah, Rome Odunze is making the Pro Bowl next season.
And I might add Antoine Randall joining that same coaching staff as a wide receiver.
Oh, absolutely.
He has a co-role as well. So I don't think he's a co-OC, but I know he's got like another role in this.
Like passing game coordinator or something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. I don't remember what exactly it is, but I remember tweeting out in 2021, watching Rome Odunze throw was, dropping a dime. I forgot. I think it was to Jalen or somebody else across the field. And I was like, oh, he's got some old school Antoine Randall. So I love that marriage of all 3 of them with Ben Johnson calling the plays Antoine Rondell is developing it even more so because like Rome is the guy that you can just mold everything around in a similar way. This is going to be cheating here. The obvious one for me is if it's not Rome, it's the guy in Atlanta, Michael Penix Jr. I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Because everybody a year ago we were talking like, oh, really? Are you going to bet a first-round pick and wait for Kirk 2 or 3 years? Mike's like, I don't really care. I'll just wait for old man River to retire himself. And look what happened. Kirk struggled to come back from the Achilles. And I think that's when that pick became so valuable. It's like, oh, wow, this rookie quarterback you guys had to plug and play. And I think that was the right decision to where now it's very clear Michael Penix is QB1 in Atlanta. You got the pieces around him. Jake Matthews coming back as your left tackle. Like all the essential pieces are there for Mike to succeed. And we both know how good of a quarterback Mike is. So I think, no doubt about it, I would not be surprised if Michael Penix finds himself, let's say, in the top 10 just conservatively, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's top 5 in the NFL in most passing stats by the end of this coming season. And it's going to surprise people to us. Again, everybody was surprised that they went to the national championship except for us. Like, we know when healthy, if the pieces are around him and they're all healthy, if the offensive line is stable enough, Michael Penix will thrive this fall in Atlanta.
I couldn't agree with you more, where you look at just what that whole situation is, right? With a top 10 pick at running back in Bijan Robinson, the connection that he showed with Drake London. I'm not going to get into the whole Kyle Pitts thing again. Fantasy brain. I can't go take myself down that road yet again. But it doesn't matter because the offensive line is really nice, and whoever you might want to bring in, you really need to shore up that defense. Look at what they did down the stretch, where they those last 6 games under Kirk Cousins were just some of the worst football I have watched in a very, very long time. And you throw Mike in there and all of a sudden, hey, it's just a shot in the arm. You beat the Giants in his first start. And then the defense fails down the stretch, which was just so disappointing because you had every opportunity to really just find a way to make the playoffs. And I think that's because I don't think it's cheating to take Mike. I love where you're going with that because we're going to be looking at this at the end of the year, and I think they're going to win the NFC South. I really do, because of everything that Mike brings to the table, all the talent that you've already collected there. If you're able to improve on defense, and hey, it's going to be a big part of that, Lars? Braylon Trice. Getting Braylon Trice back on that defensive line is going to do so much for them. I think it's going to be a really defensive-heavy draft for the Falcons, and I'm just excited to see where they're going to be able to go from there. But I want to get into my second guy, and I think this one is the one where it's kind of cheating because, you can't really get much worse than it was last season. And that's Jalen Polk, where it was watching Jalen Polk's first season, but it was very unfortunate. Just seeing what Gerard Mayo and that coaching staff did for his confidence it wasn't great. I'm curious to see how the Patriots are going to address receiver in the offseason, where I've heard some rumors coming out of New England where there are some veteran guys that were on the market that weren't completely sold by Drake May just yet. They're bringing in Stephon Diggs on a visit, which I don't necessarily love. I really hope that they're able to go out and address that need in the draft. And I'm not even saying this as a Patriots fan. I'm saying for Jalen Polk's sake, you invest a second-round pick in the guy. Something that Bill Belichick was absolutely horrible at was moving on from receivers way too early after saying, oh, this guy isn't working out after a year. Maybe it was a Tom Brady thing, whatever, it doesn't matter. And just saying, hey, this guy's not working out. We're a year, 2 years in. We're moving on from him right now. We're not giving a chance to see this through. Where I think that Jalen came in and they kind of hoped that he was going to be a number 1 right away. And that was not the role he was best in. He was best as a number 2, or even honestly as a number 3 when all 3 guys with Rome and then Jalen McMillan were healthy as well. So I'm really excited to see what he could look like with somebody else around him, whether it be, shout out Jed Fish, taking Tyrone McMillan in the first round at some point. I think that'd be a lot of fun, going out and, maybe trading back and getting a Matthew Golden or a Luther Burden, just somebody else who can help take the pressure off of him. I think that's going to help him a lot. And with Drake May, somebody who he built a really nice connection with over the offseason, I think he could take a big step forward this year.
So it's ironic that both of our number 2 picks are going to be wide receivers again, which again was the mind-blowing part about the last draft class, where you had 3. Polk, Rome, and one guy that had something in common with Randy Moss and only Randy Moss, and that's Jalen McMillan.
Absolutely.
5, but I'm looking at the stats here. It have 50-plus receiving yards and a receiving touchdown in 5 or more consecutive games as a rookie. Jalen McMillan, and Randy Moss.
Yep.
That is the list. And so when I look at it, Baker Mayfield, Baker the cake maker is back in Tampa Bay. All the pieces are there. I think for me, Jalen was a guy where he really, again, came on toward the end of the season where he really started to hit his stride by week, I want to say like 8 or 9, and just kept on going. And for me, it was like, man, this is exactly what I've been saying. Like, it's like Jalen can be this guy. And it's not necessarily that he's a number one, because you still have Chris Godwin, you still have a couple of guys down there in Tampa Bay, which is perfect for Jalen. Have him be that over-the-middle slot guy where you just let him go do his thing when you have guys on the outside. It's a perfect situation where, again, I don't want to make predictions, even though we do love to make predictions on the show, where I would not be surprised. And again, this is saying a lot because of where Rome is on, if Ben Johnson and Cook. I would not be surprised if Jalen is right there with Rome in terms of either yardage or yards per game or yards per. There will be some stat where Rome and Jalen are really, really neck and neck. I don't know which one it is necessarily yet, but it would not surprise me if Jalen McMillan emerges as one of the top receivers because he's got the perfect situation to be in.
So I like that a lot. I want to push back a little bit on it before we get out of here because of another Washington guy, and that's Cade Otton, where I'm just curious to see what that's going to look like over the course of the offseason, or not the offseason, or just as we get into just practices and everything like that, because there's a realistic world where maybe Chris Godwin isn't fully healthy coming off a dislocated ankle. And there's a world where he is, because Jalen, where you're absolutely right, where if Chris Godwin is not 100% at the start of the season, Jalen could be the number 2 option. But there's also a world where he's the number 4, because you got Mike Evans, you got Chris Godwin, and then you also have Cade Otton in there, who was spectacular last season, especially immediately following that injury. So I just want to throw Cade Otton in there as an honorable mention, where he set career highs in, I believe, catches, yards, and tied it in touchdowns last season. He could keep going up as well. And that's a guy, hey, he's due for a payday. He's coming up on this is the final year of his rookie contract. And he's somebody where if he keeps producing like that, he could get a nice fat contract on the open market and then have his spot taken by another former Husky in Devin Culp. So just a couple things to keep an eye on there. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank all of you for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop right down below in the comments section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's 5-star reviews, it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.